整个好尴尬。
你要什么？
哦 ，our paper。
Annoying when it does that, isn't it? Are we more or less ready? Would you mind separating yourselves from your mobile phones? I know that's difficult. Yeah? It's a cultural addiction. Alright, today we're going to focus. What did we do last week? What did we talk about? Last week, what happened in the lecture? Pardon? Hello, are you out there? Are you here? Are you with me? Yeah? What did we discuss in last week's lecture? Thank you, Akiko. Okay. Give me a little couple of sentence summary of what media effects theory says. What does it say? What does media effects theory? It looks like everybody's here. It's amazing. What does media effects theory say? Pardon?
Alienate. Separate the. What to say that? Separate the. It will change the relation, social relationship.
Okay. Obviously, you need a little bit of a refresher about media effects. Media effect is linked with Marxist and political economic assumptions, including Frankfurt School assumptions, that the media producer, the company, is much more powerful than the receiver in a mass-mediated commercial political world. So basically media effects theorists tend to see you and I as audiences as passive, as people who are very influenced by ideology, advertising, patriarchy, racial bias, and so on and so forth. So media effects theory see audiences as weak. Today we're going to focus on active audiences. Okay? Active audience is a theory that it comes later historically. It came through in the 70s and the 80s in Britain and America. It's linked with cultural studies and Stuart Hall. It's research that, as I mentioned at the end of the lecture last week, active audience theory borrows ethnographic, let me just write that word on the board. Does anybody know what ethnography means? Ethnography? It's a... No?
Is it population based on race or
It's...
ethnic group?
Yeah, well, it's a kind of way of it's a methodology of anthropology that involves participant observation. So instead of this huge gap between the researcher and the people, the culture that's researching, what happens is that ethnographers, they go to live with families, even in foreign cultures, and they observe and they take part in the media rituals that people. So it's completely different. Remember, we talked about scientific experimental. That's that's a huge distance, isn't it? Science is always above, it transcends. So ethnography, anthropology is about working with people and observing them as they use the media. Not the media using them, but how people use the media. So it assumes that people have more power, audiences have more power. It assumes that audiences don't agree about everything. Yeah? Because one of the theories that we're going to come to in a moment when I go through the bullet points is Stuart Hall and his theory of encoding, decoding, and also David Morley. And basically they look at the audience as having three principal responses to the media. Number one is you accept the media, you don't criticize it. Number two, you oppose it, you reject it. And number three, you negotiate it. So you're kind of half-half. I like this part, and this part is wrong. What I'm going to show you now, because most of you, let's face it, are Chinese, is I'm going to show you a little documentary clip from a program called The Listening Post, made by Al Jazeera English. It's about Xinjiang. Right? In the West, a bit like Hong Kong, I suppose, Xinjiang is very controversial, right? And I don't know, I'm not making any assumptions, what you know about Xinjiang in your country, but this is a Western documentary representation about Xinjiang. You're my audience, most of you are Chinese, but obviously all opinions are important here. I want you to think about, is it true? Do you accept it? Is it biased? Is it propaganda? Is it anti-Chinese? Whatever. So I'm very interested to hear what your audience response is to this documentary that I'm about to show you. China cables. Would you like subtitles? I guess you would. Because usually this is on YouTube. If I do it on YouTube, then we can get subtitles.
I'm being kicked out of here. I have no idea where me and my...
Another big leak of secret Chinese government documents. The Chinese crackdown on the Muslim Uyghur minority.
Human rights abuses in the Xinjiang region is where about 1 million Uyghur...
China says they're training facilities designed to eradicate extremism.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories that we're covering this week. Big news that Beijing didn't want out there. Somebody inside the Communist Party wants the outside world to know what is happening in Xinjiang. Conflict of interest, the corporate kind. Reporters at Bloomberg News cannot investigate their boss, who happens to be running for the White House. They're tracking journalists from inside their phones. Governments are buying an insidious piece of Israeli software to target activists and reporters they don't like. And is a deep fake version of Boris Johnson.
Huzzah! Alas, why should you believe me?
Any less credible than the real Boris Johnson. It is one of the biggest human rights stories on the planet, one that we've reported on before, just not in this kind of detail. It is about China, specifically the province of Xinjiang, and the estimated 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslim ethnic minorities currently held in massive internment camps there. Previously, most of what the world knew about Xinjiang came through some satellite imagery, carefully controlled official tours of those camps. plus the accounts of some of those imprisoned there. Now, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and the New York Times both say they have troves of classified documents to work with, reportedly leaked from within China's Communist Party. Both organizations say the documents prove the internment camps are not about re-educating extremists or fighting terrorism, as Beijing would have the world believe, but to indiscriminately imprison and brainwash Xinjiang's Muslim population. In response, China has borrowed a phrase or two from offshore, calling the leaks fabrications and fake news. But as new evidence emerges, Beijing's narrative is proving increasingly difficult to defend. Our starting point this week, those classified documents on the camps in Xinjiang.
It's exceedingly rare for classified Chinese government documents to come to light. The last time there was a leak of this kind was, to my knowledge, in 2001 with the leak of the Tiananmen Papers.
This is an unprecedented revelation because the Chinese government, under the ruling Communist Party, have been one of the most secretive entities around the world.
These new documents blow the CCP's narrative out of the water. There's no more denying, no more hiding. It's basically game over for Beijing's propaganda in Xinjiang.
The leaks represent a quantum leap in our understanding of what is unfolding in Xinjiang, human rights violations on an historic scale. What the Chinese government has produced, what the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and the New York Times have published, is basically a how-to manual. How to incarcerate as many as 1 million Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities. How to deprogram them of their Muslim culture. How to reprogram them, meld them into the larger population of Han Chinese. How to hide the story from the outside world, and when exposed, how to spin that story by calling the prison camps vocational training centers, where people can learn job skills and are supposedly free to leave.
The one thing that stood out for me in the leaked confidential document is that the very first section talks about anti-escape measures, police guards, locking doors, complete camera surveillance. Even though we kind of knew about this, I was very struck by the intensity at which this was described in the document. The other really notable insight talks about how confidential and sensitive the so-called vocational training work is. Meaning the Chinese government itself was really trying to shroud the whole campaign in a cloud of secrecy. It had a strategy of denial, and the classified document clearly confirms this strategy.
What also really struck me was the point system that's used in the camps. So inmates are graded according to their behavior and also according to their test scores. So they're required to study Chinese language, to study Chinese communist ideology and Chinese law, and then they have to take exams. Those exam scores are used to calculate points, and those points are used to determine rewards and punishments, such as when they're able to see their family and when they're able to be released.
What's most important about these documents is that they are evidence. You know, this shows a clear intent by the second most powerful government in the world to politically re-engineer people's thinking.
That's quite a strong statement, isn't it? The Chinese government is politically re-engineering, brainwashing 1 million people in Xinjiang. Okay? Now, none of you have seen this before. Some of you are from China. Most of you are from China. We've got a Japanese representative, we've got a Korean representative. So I want to ask you two, Akiko first. Now, you haven't seen this documentary before. Do you think it's truthful and objective, or do you think it has a political message?
Well, I don't know if this is totally true or not, because I don't know the evidence, but maybe they are showing evidence here.
Because it's based on a leak from the Chinese government,
Oh, yeah.
which is kind of like empirical evidence, isn't it?
But just I think this is like a Michel Foucault's theory.
Go on.
So if this is true, it's like as Michel Foucault said, it's like
Biopolitics.
Yeah. So it's kind of chilly.
Yes.
I don't know what to say.
Okay, but
Yeah.
don't forget, do you know anything about Al Jazeera English? Al Jazeera English, the TV company?
Oh,
It's owned by the Emir of Qatar, who is, obviously he's a billionaire, and he also runs the country. His company Al Jazeera, there's two companies, there's Al Jazeera Arabic, this is Al Jazeera English. Al Jazeera English is quite Western Eurocentric, yeah, I would argue. This program, the Listening Post, oh that's helpful, is probably a bit more critical than most Al Jazeera English, okay? So in a way, so if I said to you, out of the 3 active audience responses that Stuart Hall talks about and David Morley, do you accept this message? Do you reject the message? Or do you think I partially agree?
Well, I'd like to listen to Chinese people's opinion as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very good response. So you're not going to be convinced until you've actually spoken to Chinese people about their real experience, not mediated experience, their real experience. But don't forget, what people know in China, if you don't live in Xinjiang, is also dependent on the Chinese government, media. So is it that different, unless you're actually from Xinjiang? Yeah? Because you can observe what's happening with your own eyes and ears. Okay, our Korean friend first, before we talk to the Chinese people. What's your impression?
Oh, sorry, I don't understand this video.
Very honest. Very honest.
Sorry.
Okay, no, we can use that in terms of like media effects and active audience response. Clearly, what you could say is it's not aimed at you, therefore you don't understand it. Maybe it's to do with language. I don't know. But clearly, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you what it's about for now. We can talk about what it's about later. But that's, as a kind of media effects experiment, that's your response. That's absolutely fine. So now we turn to the Chinese people. What's your view on this text? Propaganda? Anti-Chinese? That's what your government would say. What do you guys think? Do you want me to switch off the camera?
No, thank you.
I think most of these are true.
Ooh. Okay.
I have heard something when I was in China, and about Xinjiang.
Yeah.
Some of them say that a few years ago, the internet in Xinjiang is blocked. Nobody can send anything out.
Yes.
And one of my friends is army. He was army. He was sent there.
Yeah.
So a lot of things happen. But
so the way you connect your own experience, your own knowledge from being Chinese and knowing people who have interaction with Xinjiang is basically you accept it.
yes.
It's not even a negotiated reading. You basically accept what this media message.
I do accept.
Okay. Is that the same for the rest of you?
I don't think so.
Go on.
Because I traveled into Xinjiang for 1 month this summer, and very interesting. I traveled with foreigner people, a Japanese guy, and we travel together, look the same thing, but we have a different view, different opinion. I think it's very interesting. Everything I think maybe it's okay or it's good, but he always think this is negative. And
so are you rejecting what the documentary is saying? Are you saying it's fake news? Do you think they are constructing a message that's completely fake?
maybe it's not completely fake, but...
So this is I would suggest you've got a negotiated reading. Yeah? Yeah? but you think it's probably exaggerated. Do other people? You were Jiaming. You were laughing. Why?
Because my mother worked in government, and I think of some I can't talk.
Because your mum will find out. If you got, is your mum inside you saying, "Don't say the name. He's foreign. He's against us."
And my mother taught me some experience in Xinjiang. So I believe this is true, but sometimes it's very hard to say because China is too big, and there's many different problems the government should address with.
It has different aspects.
Yeah.
And we don't just focus on one point.
Yes.
And to narrow.
So, do you think the political balance of this documentary is too negative? Do you think it's kind of trying to undermine it? Because think about it. Does it interview the Chinese government in what we've seen so far? Do we hear a Chinese government representative talking? Not really. It's kind of weighted towards the victims. What they're alleging are the victims, the Xinjiang people that are in prison who are being re-educated. Yeah. So okay. So there's a perfect example that most of you, I suggest, have a negotiated reading. You had an accepting reading. Nobody rejects it because I think it's got enough truth in it. Yeah. That does not fit the media effects model. The media effects model says that it all has the same effect on you at the same time. Yeah? Do you think this documentary has the same effect on you at the same time? But imagine if you were a Western audience. Yeah? If it was a Western audience, what would they say about the documentary?
Oh my God.
It's true.
Yeah.
They'd be much more like China's a bad country doing bad things to good people. Right? And the target audience of Al Jazeera English is Western English language speakers. Yeah? So that's why I chose this particular clip, because of most of you being Chinese. Okay, let's go to the theory now. And if there's time at the end of the lecture, we'll watch another clip of something else, completely different. So let's go to here. Okay. So active audience theory, like I said at the end of last week's lecture, part of active audience theory is what we call uses and gratifications theory. Uses and gratifications theory, theoretically, is interested in how people use the media, why they use the media, not the media using them. It sees the audience as active. Uses and gratifications theory focuses on individuals. So, media effects theory looks for a common interpretation from an audience, like a group, everybody has the same response. Uses and gratifications theory thinks that it's important to focus on individual interpretations. So the focus on the individual. Don't forget the individual we associate with pluralist assumptions, neoliberal assumptions, right? Capitalist assumptions. The uses and gratifications theory doesn't look at social effects at all, right? It focuses on individuals, it abstracts them. It does not pay attention to the actual texts that individuals use. So, it doesn't analyse what's in the words, the political message that's in the words, it just looks at the effect on individuals. So it focuses much more on the reception, not the production. Media effects focuses on power in the production of the message. But active audience theory, uses and gratifications, doesn't pay attention to the actual words themselves. So it comes from a 1970s strong input to media effects debate from the cultural studies that we associate with Stuart Hall, who established the Centre for Contemporary Cultural Studies in Birmingham. Active audience theory is also influenced by literary studies, anthropology, as we mentioned before, and the Italian neo-Marxist theorist Gramsci. Gramsci. Well, we can talk about Gramsci in the seminar. I don't want to go into detail now. If there's time at the end of the lecture, we could talk about Gramsci. Stuart Hall was quite influenced by Gramsci. I'm not exaggerating. This encoding-decoding model is probably one of the most famous media theories. Yeah? And so we need to go slowly through it to understand it as clearly as possible. So the first assumption of Stuart Hall's encoding-decoding model, encoding means making the message, decoding means understanding. Right? Encoding means making, producing the message, decoding means understanding. So, let me just draw a little diagram. So, if we put the message in the middle, okay, the first thing that the message that happens with the media message is it's encoded, and then it's decoded. Yeah? So, as I said to you already, media effects theory focuses on encoding. The power is in the production. The audience that decodes is weak. What's clever and sophisticated, and I think very good about Stuart Hall's theory, is that he's focusing on not just the encoding, but also how people interpret. So he's kind of in the middle. He's looking at the power of the encoding as well as the power of the decoding. The power of the audience to interpret as well as the power of the media producer itself. So, he assumes that the media don't have direct effects upon people. In other words, that they have indirect effect. Remember when Akiko said, she said, I'm not sure I agree with this documentary, I want to talk to Chinese people. That's an indirect effect. You're not allowing it to influence you. You're not going to believe 100% what it says. That's an indirect effect. Media texts are encoded with specific messages by their producers. One of the specific messages in the Al Jazeera clip that I showed you about Xinjiang is, as I said to you already, China's a big bad country, right? And why we should be skeptical about the message, why we should be critical audiences, is that we know that American foreign policy at the moment, and Western foreign policy in general, is very aggressive and negative about China. Yeah? So a lot of news about China is more negative than positive. Hong Kong being another example, right? Yeah? So there is a foreign policy bias in the news, in Western media, against China, to try to, suggest that China is, it's basically, it's information war, it's propaganda. China is the enemy. Some people even go so far as to argue that there is going to be I hope it doesn't happen, it could happen, there's going to be a new Cold War between China and America, yeah? Instead of America and the Soviet Union, yeah? So the media play a very powerful role in constructing the enemy. So remember Chomsky, the 5 filters, enemy, there's the link. You could argue that this documentary clip that I showed you is constructing China as an enemy. Yeah? An enemy of freedom, an enemy of Western values, an enemy of democracy. Yeah? So think about it in those terms. The encoding-decoding model you need to focus on the institutions, that's the media companies and organizations that produce text, and the assumptions of producers. So the encoding-decoding model employs semiotic methods to analyze text produced. Media text must be decoded or interpreted in order to be understood. Reading a newspaper article or watching a news item on television is not a passive activity, but involves interpretation. So this is like political subjectivity. Yeah, there is no Stuart Hall does not accept objectivity. Yeah, he wants a more complex analysis of the relationship between media producers and media audiences. He's very against behavioural studies of media effects because these fail to take into account interpretation, subjectivity, culture. They also fail to take into account social context of media reception. The last point about encoding-decoding model. Media messages are likely to be interpreted or decoded according to a worldview and social circumstances. For example, your class, this is really key, this is really important. Your class, whether you are ruling class or working class, your gender or middle class, your gender, male or female, education, occupation, change how you understand the media, right? So everything about you, your gender, your sex, your religion, change subjectively how you understand the media. There is a difference between, thank you, actually the difference isn't too big between Akiko's Japanese interpretation, your Korean interpretation and Chinese interpretation. So your culture changes how you interpret texts. Then we move to David Morley. David Morley developed Stuart Hall's ideas, and he focused particularly on a current affairs program that's stopped being broadcast many years ago now. It was called the Nationwide Audience, and he basically tested Stuart Hall's encoding-decoding model. So that the Nationwide Nationwide was a current affairs program, about an hour long, that just had extended news stories about current affairs that were happening in Britain. He focused on 29 groups from different backgrounds shown on the edition of Nationwide program, and he asked the audiences to comment on it. What he found was that there were 3 very distinct different readings of the program. First of all, there was a worldview that was closest to the program's worldview, almost objective, that accepted the perspective. That's called a dominant reading. So today, Fan's reading of the Xinjiang documentary was a dominant reading, right? Because she just accepted it. She didn't reject anything. She didn't negotiate. That's a dominant reading. Groups whose worldview is most different from the worldview of the program reject its perspective. That's called oppositional, right? Nobody here today opposed the Xinjiang documentary. Everybody thought it had some truth. Some groups negotiate the meaning. I think most of you negotiate the meaning, the Chinese students here. They accept some aspects of the worldview, but they reject others. And I think most of you today were negotiated readers, interpreters. One group simply ignores the program, seeing it as having no relevance to their lives. So Nationwide provided model for further studies. Let's just go down. So this is when we come to ethnographic studies, methods. And what we call reception analysis rather than media effects research. This is not the same as uses and gratifications. So the next famous piece of active audience research is by Katz and Liebes. It's on in fact I think I'll show you a clip now. They conducted a study on a really popular American cheesy soap opera called Dallas. Has anyone heard of Dallas? Yeah? Dallas, it's like a soap opera about oil millionaires, barons, and it's very over the top, very dramatic, but it's basically about the lifestyle of, it's fictional, it's dramatic, of oil millionaires in America. All right? So before we talk about the results of the Katz and Liebes research, let's look at a clip of Dallas. I think I can get it on YouTube.
Unlike consoles, Stadia doesn't take up any space.
People got your story. I got work to do.
One more question, sir. Did Ewing Oil invest all of its capital in those leases? And does nationalization mean the end of the Ewing Empire?
I think my son better answer that.
Well, thank you, Dad. That's really two questions, but yes, we diversified, if that's what you want to know.
What are your other investments, Mr. Ewing?
I can't reveal that at this time, but we were able to get into another deal before they nationalized the wells.
Did you suffer any losses?
Well, yes, Ewing Oil suffered quite a few losses, but we're still in business. I want to emphasize that.
Well, Mr. Ewing,
that's really all I can talk about today. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it, gentlemen and ladies. I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. That's all I can talk about. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's good.
Ewing Oil. Please hold on. Ewing Oil. Bobby, JR and your daddy are inside.
you two seem to be taking all this pretty well.
Well, I'm happy to report that Ewing Oil Company is long alive. Thanks to JR. Tell me.
Yeah, a couple of days ago, I had a chance to sell 75% of our holdings for $10 million a point. Somebody's looking after us, boy.
You trying to tell me Ewing Oil just got lucky?
Well, I had a chance to get involved in a pretty big deal. A chance to buy into some gas fields on the East Coast. Dad and I have been talking about it for about a year now. And you know what? Those old boys just wouldn't speak to me unless I had cash in my hand.
Who bought the leases?
Well, Von Leland was one of them. About time that old barracuda got his comeuppance.
No, come on, JR. Don't make fun of a man's misery.
Who else, JR?
Oh, same old boys been trying to get in on this deal from the beginning.
Boys in the cartel?
Yeah, you know, Andy Bradley, Jordan Lee, Seth Stone.
I bet this is a gamble. They know that, Bobby.
Did you know about this, Daddy? Why weren't we told, JR? You're supposed to clear it with us before you do anything.
Well, you all were up in Colorado. I didn't have time for that. I had to move fast. Good thing I did, too, Bob.
You believe what he's saying?
Bobby, you call me a liar.
You must be mighty proud, JR. You must be on top of the world.
Jordan, I know how you feel.
Is that right? You tell me how I feel, and I'll tell you a few things.
I just told you, Jordan. JR didn't know anything about the nationalization.
The hell he didn't. Months ago we begged him to get in on that deal. He wouldn't even respond to our telephone calls. Then suddenly he's ready to sell immediately.
Jordan, I told you I needed that cash for other deals.
You knew those wells were going to be worthless, and you suckered your friends into buying the leases.
Now, hold on a minute, Jordan. We took quite a big...
Okay, I really hate it. But what do you think? You're the audience. It's very dated, isn't it? It looks very old.
Yeah.
It's not a great clip. Didn't prepare the clip. But basically, Katz and Leibis, when they conducted this research, it says on your handout, diverse interpretations. They basically had a diverse range of audiences. Some people were Russian, some were Japanese, some were Israeli, some were American. What do you think the Russians or the Soviet audience said about Dallas when they watched it? The research was carried out in the 1990, so that was just at the end of the Cold War. What do you think a Russian audience thinks about Dallas? You can guess. They rejected it as purely capitalism, celebrating materialism, capitalism, millionaire lifestyle, selling the American lifestyle dream. Yeah? So they ideologically rejected it. Whereas most Western Americans just see it as a bit of fun, a bit of drama. Yeah? And so basically, people with different cultural backgrounds interpreted Dallas in a different way. Some rejected it, some opposed it, and some people negotiated it. Going back to the slides again. Let's get the lights back on. Okay, so the last active audience theorist that I want to talk about, he's quite famous, is Daniel Miller. He carried out a very interesting piece of research in 1997 based on audiences watching a very, very cheap American soap opera. I can't even remember what it's called. But what he found was that this Trinidad, you know where Trinidad is in the world? Do you know where it is? Trinidad and Tobago? It's near Jamaica. Yeah? Jamaica? You know where Jamaica is? Yeah? Where is it?
Africa. Jamaica.
Not really, no, it's not.
Yeah,
South America.
But
Resort Island.
yeah.
And it's a former British colony.
It is a former British colony. Yeah, it's an island, isn't it? And it's basically, it's in the Pacific. It's between Asia and Africa. Yeah? Anyway, the point is that this, from a cultural perspective, the Trinidadian audience, this American cheap soap opera was just all about American life. They did not interpret the text as being about America. They interpreted the plot, the story, as being about their own local national culture. So although it was just about American life, American politics, people in Trinidad translated the politics into their own national politics. This is what we call cultural appropriation. Although it was a very American soap opera about American culture, they thought it was actually about their own culture. They translated it into their own culture. So that's not the same as media effects. That's actually actively using the story to think about your own culture. Yeah? So more complex understand. Does that make any sense, what I just said? Yeah? So, you know, it's called, I think it's called The Young and the Restless, that the soap opera. I think it's called The Young and the Restless, and it's just a really cheesy, cheap soap opera about American life. And the Trinidad audience, this was the actual research carried out by Daniel Miller. They didn't see it as about American politics. They saw it as being about Trinidad. They saw it about the corruption in their own government. So they translated it. They interpreted the story in their own cultural terms. Yeah. So they translated American politics into Trinidad politics. Yeah, that's what we call cultural appropriation. It's not a strong media effects, it's more of an active audience theory. Yeah? Any questions so far? What I want to do for the last 10 or 15 minutes is I want to show you another text and see how you react to that text. I think one of the things about talking about active audience theory is I can give you a long list of all the research, it all gets very boring. You actually need to see the text and you need to experience them yourselves. So has anybody, while I'm getting the next text ready for you to watch, has anybody got any questions so far? Anything that I haven't explained well or anything that you need to ask about? No? Okay, let's watch another text. I think I'm going to show you an ad now, and I'm not going to say anything about the ad. I will just play it to you, and then we'll see how you respond to the ad.
There's a rantan in my bedroom and I don't know what to do. She plays with all my teddies and keeps borrowing my shoe. She destroys all of my houseplants and she keeps on shouting boo. She throws away my chocolate and she howls at my shampoo. There's a rantan in my bedroom and I don't want her to stay. So I told the naughty rantan that she had to go away. A rantan in my bedroom, just before you go, why were you in my bedroom? I really want to know. There's a human in my forest and I don't know what to do. He destroyed all of our trees for your food and your shampoo. There's a human in my forest and I don't know what to do. He took away my mother, and I'm scared he'll take me too. There are humans in my forest, and I don't know what to do. They're burning it for palm oil. So I thought I'd stay with you. Oh, Rantan in my bedroom, now I do know what to do. I'll fight to save your home and I'll stop you feeling blue. I'll share your story far and wide so others can fight too. Oh, Rantan in my bedroom, I swear it on the stars. The future's not yet written, but I'll make sure it is ours.
Okay, what do you think about that?
Touching.
Touching? Just trying to focus basically on Stuart Hall's encoding decoding model and Morley's accept, negotiate, reject. What's the story about? Why is it touching, Fan? Tell us about that.
Because monkeys talk about his mom, his home, his mom, and everybody has mom, has family, destroyed by somewhere else.
This is an ad for the supermarket Iceland, right? It's not like a normal ad. What's interesting about your response so far is that you've totally accepted it, right? That it's okay, that it's good. Why is it good? Why is this ad a good ad?
It makes it emotional.
Yeah, but what's it doing environmentally, do you think? Maybe you need to watch it again because it's very quick. What's it doing? What's the message about the environment? Did you get the message? I'm going to play it to you again because it's so quick.
There's a Rantan in my bedroom and I don't know what to do. She plays with all my teddies and keeps borrowing my shoe. She destroys all of my houseplants and she keeps on shouting boo. She throws away my chocolate and she howls at my shampoo. There's a Rantan in my bedroom and I don't want her to stay. So I told the naughty Rantan that she had to go away. Oh, Rantan in my bedroom, just before you go, why were you in my bedroom? I really want to know. There's a human in my forest and I don't know what to do. He destroyed all of our trees for your food and your shampoo. There's a human in my forest and I don't know what to do. He took away my mother and I'm scared he'll take me too. There are humans in my forest and I don't know what to do. They're burning it for palm oil. So I thought I'd stay with you. Oh, Rantan in my bedroom, now I do know what to do. I'll fight to save your home and I'll stop you feeling blue. I'll share your story far and wide so others can fight too. Oh, Rantan in my bedroom, I swear it on the stars. The future's not yet written, but I'll make sure it is ours.
So, what's the political message of the advertisement?
Protect the forest and nature.
Deforestation is basically in order to create agriculture for palm oil is destroying the habitat of orangutans. So palm oil, I don't know if you know, it's one of the most common cooked oils that goes into all kinds of food products like peanut butter, and they mentioned shampoo. Yeah, one of the main reasons that forests are being destroyed is to grow palm oil. Yeah, for capitalist, industrial agricultural reasons. Now think about this. This is an ad, a commercial ad for Iceland, right? You don't usually see ads like this, do you? Because it's basically saying palm oil is destroying rainforests, right? So, do you all accept the ad as being true? Do you reject it, or do you negotiate it? Why do you negotiate it, Casey? Who said? Oh, I don't want to just talk to Fan. Somebody else.
Yeah.
It's great, Fan, that you talk. I like it. But anybody else? You accept it. Why do you accept it?
Because I think that's true. We destroy the plant, or destroy the forest.
But it's an advertisement. What's the purpose of an advertisement? To make profit.
Yeah, to prove.
And to keep the advertisers happy, not just to sell the product, which in this case is Iceland, to sell capitalism itself, right? So if you are a British regulator, yeah, looking at this ad, who regulates the advertising industry, what are you going to say about this ad? It breaks the rules. This ad is banned. It's rejected by the British authorities because it's anti-capitalist. Yeah? So look at that. You all accepted it as true, but at a very high level, commercially high level, in the advertising industry, it's been banned. Yeah? So can you see the... Yeah, I mean, in a way, it seems to me that we all accept it as we're all intelligent audiences, and we accept that there's an environmental problem, but at a different level, in terms of censorship, in terms of commercial control, this is so the truth. I mean, this is just really back to I'm just trying to make a link with advertising. Advertising makes the truth a problem, doesn't it? Yeah. This is why we are getting so confused about the media these days, because we don't know whether it's fake, we don't know whether it's true, but as soon as you have an ad that tells the truth, it gets banned. What does that tell you about advertising? Yeah? As soon as you have an ad that tells, advertising is all about lying, clearly. Yeah? I'm going to show you another one about trees, if I can find it. Do you want to see something about trees? Pardon? Something about trees. If I can find the link. Might have to. Do you mind waiting a couple of minutes for me to find it?
Yeah.
You can talk. Yeah? Well, I just want to show you that. I think it's on my Facebook. How trees talk. Got it.
I'm guessing.
What does it take to be a Shinrin dancer? You think so, Mike?
Okay, we've got it.
Imagine you're walking through a forest. I'm guessing you're thinking of a collection of trees, but a forest is much more than what you see. Underground, there is this other world, a world of infinite biological pathways that connect trees and allow the forest to behave as though it's a single organism. Mycorrhiza literally means fungus root. They're the mushrooms. The mushrooms are fungal threads that form a mycelium, and where the fungal cells interact with the root cells, there's a trade of carbon for nutrients. The web is so dense that there can be hundreds of kilometers of mycelium under a single footstep. That mycelium connects different individuals, not only of the same species, but between species. We have found that mother trees nurture their young. A mother tree can be connected to hundreds of other trees. Mother trees will send their excess carbon through the mycorrhizal network to the understory seedlings. They even reduce their own root competition to make elbow room for their kids. When mother trees are injured or dying, they also send messages of wisdom onto the next generation of seedlings. So we've used isotope tracing to trace carbon moving from an injured mother tree down her trunk into the mycorrhizal network and into her neighboring seedlings. Not only carbon, but also defense signals. Through back and forth conversations, they increase the resilience of the whole community. That's because there are many hub trees and many overlapping networks. So trees talk. But they're also vulnerable, not only to natural disturbances, like bark beetles that preferentially attack big old trees, but high-grade logging and clear-cut logging. You see, you can take out 1 or 2 hub trees, but there comes a tipping point. Because hub trees are not unlike rivets in an airplane. You can take out 1 or 2 and the plane still flies. But you take out 1 too many, or maybe that one holding on the wings, and the whole system collapses. Massive disturbance at this scale is known to affect hydrological cycles, degrade wildlife habitat, and emit greenhouse gases back to the atmosphere, which creates more disturbance and more tree diebacks. We need to save our old-growth forests. These are the repositories of genes and mother trees and mycorrhizal networks. We need to reestablish local involvement in our own forests. When we do cut, we need to save the mother trees and networks so they can pass their wisdom on to the next generation of trees. We need to regenerate our forests with a diversity of species and genotypes and structures, allowing natural regeneration. We have to give Mother Nature the tools she needs to use her intelligence to self-heal. And we need to remember that forests aren't competing with each other, they're super cooperators.
Okay, what do you think about that as an audience? It contrasts with, obviously it links with the previous one about Iceland and deforestation. Yeah? It's a public service advertisement. What, as an audience, do you accept, reject, or negotiate it? Is there anything, what do you think? I want to know what you think about it. What's the message of this ad? From the encoding, why have they made this documentary? Let's go back to Stuart Hall, encoding. What was the purpose of encoding this message?
Tell the audience to protect their forest.
Yes, but also to raise our awareness that trees are intelligent. They are not just objects, wood to be turned into human needs. Yeah? So trees communicate, they feel, they communicate, they help each other. Under the ground, they have a whole network of roots. And, you know, it's even the case that in a forest, if you have a young tree, like this height, next to older trees, often the older trees move their branches back so that the younger tree can get more light. Yeah? This is not what you see in mainstream media, is it? Yeah? Because mainstream media is always making the environment look like something that we need to sell, use, exploit, destroy, kill. Yeah? Yeah? True? So again, another example of a media text that most of you seem to accept. Yeah? Okay? That's all. That's all I wanted to share with you. So we'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So most of the advertisements are like they make the videos for profit, right?
Yes.
But what about like a charity kind of advertising?
Yes, that's what you could call public service advertisements. Yeah? So public service advertisements are clearly, they've got a positive political message. Yeah?
Not for any kind of profit, just like telling you.
Yes, not for any profit. But that ad there, if you showed that to sort of, I'm guessing, I don't have any evidence. If I showed that to the average kind of British teenager, they would kind of maybe reject it because they just think it was, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that, but some people would just think that ad's not really cool, that it's, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not saying that.
But they would think like it's boring, or what do you mean like not cool?
I think I've got this idea of a stereotype of the kind of somebody who is so driven by money and greed and desire that they'd say that's a really uncool text because it's basically it's too I don't know, I don't know really. I don't know what all I'm trying to get you to think about is that if you look at most media that's commercially made, it always makes the environment like it's a problem, that's something that you should exploit, like an object, right? And that kind of media text does not get shown to young people nearly enough. I think that's the simple point. Yeah. I don't think I made my point very well, but I tried. Yeah. Sometimes you have bad days. I'm human.
That's good enough.
Yeah, that's enough for now. We'll come back to it.